But let me introduce my first guest, Tracey-Leigh Davey. How are you, Tracy?
I'm very well, thank you, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, as I said, I'm excited. I can't wait for the middle of the show, Dr. Steve Questions. It's full of optimism. But I just
Good.
wanted to pull you up there for a little bit because I found you or you found me on Facebook or whatever it was. But what really made me jump out about you, Tracey-Leigh Davey, was the name of your business. What is the name of your business?
It's More Than Mediocre.
Oh, so what does more than mediocre? Why can't I settle for less? Why can't I be just mediocre? What's your business all about?
My business is a counselling business. So I have 3 consultant counsellors working for me and myself in the business. And we do events and groups and counselling, obviously. So the name originally came from my desire, I guess, for all things more than mediocre. I was never really satisfied with the status quo in life. And I grew up in a family where it wasn't really okay to want more. That was really a no-no. They were snobby, they were greedy. Anyone who did well or used their talents was, thought better of themselves than they should. So it was really quite put down. So for me, I always wanted to reach out, I guess, and go further than what I was told I could have. And I always believed that was possible.
Okay, so why not just settle for less? Is that going to leave us in a state of being unsatisfied? Or what's your thought there?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of us are dissatisfied. And if anything, this time in 2020 has kind of showed us a little bit about what we were not satisfied with anyway, with the way things were. At least I hope, and that's what I'm hearing from my clients, is people realising that. I think deep down we all know that there's more than what we see at first glance, and that we are capable of more than just what we are given from birth.
And I agree with you. There are a lot of people who are sitting there and they are feeling very dissatisfied. And there's things that are holding people back. Now, these things that hold us back, let's call them fear. And in most cases, I believe it is fear that holds people back. And that's why I'm encouraging people to find those fears and hunt them down. You've got a great strategy called, I think it was called Fear Shall Not Be My Master. What do you mean by that?
Well, that's actually the title of a module in a course that I run called Making Life Work. So it's all around, we all have fear. We all have it. There's no way to avoid that. It's not about living without fear. It's about recognising that fear is an emotion. It's not a fact. So once you realise that it's an emotion, you can then harness that. Any emotion or any energy, as emotion is, it's all energy, can be harnessed into something positive. And you can use fear and kind of, when you harness it, you ride it like a horse. It becomes something that you steer and direct in the way that you want to go in life.
So not only should we be hunting fear down, we should be using it as our energy to drive right out of it. So what are some of the warning signs there? So, I think you've described it as a red balloon, that fear is an emotion that starts to inflate in your brain. Can you expand on that for me?
Yeah. I do call it a red balloon. It's and I'm going to demonstrate here. It's like it goes off inside your brain and it takes up all the room. So your brain's squashed to the side and you can't think properly. So the first thing you need to do is deflate the balloon, and that gives rise to free thinking again. So there's strategies you can put in place to deflate the balloon, but I think it's really important to notice that you're in a state of fear. And the brain's response to fear is automatic. It diverts the cortex in the brain. You can't think through that. So you must calm first and get to a state of peace so that you can think again. The cortex won't kick.
Let's have a chat about that because, I'm a great example personally. When fear's well up in me, I'm rapid to emotion. So there's no slow build up with me. One minute I'm happy, the next minute I'm exploding with whatever emotion it might be. So that fear balloon or that anxiety that's growing inside my head, what are some of the things I can do or our viewers can do to start to deflate that red balloon and start to get some rational thinking going?
Well, the first thing is recognising it. I do work with clients to really help them notice it in the body because possibly the signs are there earlier than you think. your body does respond in certain ways. So to get really clear about what signs are in your body, whether you get sweaty hands, whether you get shaky, whether you feel it rising up like heat or rage or pain in the chest, some people even get. So it's noticing what goes on in the body, whether it's increased heart rate even. And the first thing I do is focus on your breath, because that gives you a place to make an immediate difference. If you're short of oxygen, you're not going to be able to calm down. So you need to be breathing correctly. A lot of people short breathe or don't breathe at all when they feel fear and anxiety. So that's your step one, to create immediate relief. And then there's a range of techniques beyond that.
Yeah, I like to go for a walk. I find that when things start to get too much for me, I've just got to go out and get some fresh air. And ideally that fresh air is out in nature somewhere under a tree. And I really start to calm down at that point. Now, what other great things can people do? They can tap away their fingers, or what can they do there to help get through that period?
They definitely can use tapping. I use TFT tapping, which stands for thought field therapy. And that's a simple technique that involves tapping on the same meridian points that they use for acupuncture. It's been used for a long, long time. It just hasn't become big in Australia for some reason, but it's extremely effective. And what that does is it just reduces negative emotion and brings you into a state of calm very quickly. And it's quite permanent, so you can actually use it to treat trauma or heartache, say from a breakup or something, and you can really reduce the emotion that's attached to a memory on that, as well as using it for maintenance.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, I've looked talking about that. I went through a divorce quite a long time ago now, 13, 14 years ago. And the way I got through that was just to walk until I was exhausted, and that started to bring the good endorphins going. So what you've been telling us is it's really wonderful that, fears are normal, anxieties are normal. They build up, and recognising that build up is an important thing. But to address the build up before you act, because you can't rationally think when you've got this great big red balloon building up in your head, you will not be able to make good decisions. So you have to deflate that balloon through whatever method you come up with before you can start rational thinking. Is that a fair call?
I think that's a very fair call.
So how do you know? How do you know that you're at a point where you can make rational decisions?
Well, your breathing is normal. Your head feels clearer. And I think you just have to follow the peace. When you feel peace and you get a response to a thought or an idea that you have, there's always a resolution for something. And when you feel the peace, you know you're in the right spot. Anything that causes you massive anxiety, unless it's just the challenge, that's the only exception, is if it's just a challenge and you know you should do it but you're not, you've got to step up. But if it's a really negative anxiety response, then you will recognise that, and you know that when you come up with the right one, you're going to feel quite peaceful about it. And
you know you're on the right track then. All right. Well, that's some wonderful advice there, people. And viewers, I should say, is to be aware, to know that any anxiety or fear that will rise up in you, but don't make decisions at that point. Fly off at the handle, as they say. Deflate that balloon. Have a strategy to deflate the fear and anxiety that's building up in you. You'll know when you've reached that point of peace, and you'll be able to make great decisions. So a question I like to ask people on Fearless, I like to ask people what they're scared of, or what are some of the greatest fears that they've overcome in the past. So Tracey-Leigh Davey, what have you been scared of in the past?
The biggest fear that I've had to deal with in life has actually been a bit of a fear of success. I always felt like that meant I wouldn't belong. It meant I had to give up my circle, whether that was family, because I originally learned that I do well, or that I was never expected to do well. So overcoming that, stepping away, even with my peers, friends and things, if I was too different or did a lot better than them, that they would judge me or disapprove or not want to belong with them. So that's been a stage. Sorry?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, that's an unusual thing. Like, I'm on the show Fearless, which I've been running for quite a while now. Most people have the opposite fear, that they fear failure. So I think statistically that is the greatest fear amongst people, is they fear failure. And I actually hear that people fearing success too often. So it is an unusual fear, and fear of not being part of your current group or rising out of that. Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. How did you deal with it?
just expanding the comfort zone. So gradually I would step further and further out and discover that. And I think it's a bit like you're scared to be alone to start with. Step away from you hang with on a day-to-day basis a little bit and spend more time in new things that aren't as familiar. And that's scary at first, but I look at it a bit like a caterpillar going in turn and coming out of fly. You're not going to be able to get your wings unless you and do what you need to, and eventually move toward, a new group, or some people follow you and you realise that you're off for having stepped there. There was nothing to lose.
Very good. So Tracey-Leigh, I've got some audio issues coming through here, but how do we find you on, I guess, More Than Mediocre is probably a fairly easy website to find out. Is that the actual name of your website?
It's morethanmediocre.com.
Easy one. All right. Well, thanks for your time. The audio is dropping out a little bit.